All right, so Ron Paul does bring up some good questions and good points here, and I think it's an important thing to consider. Now, first off, Ron Paul said the U.S. Constitution was designed to chain down the federal government. To a large degree, yes, Congress shall make no laws, repeated several times in the Bill of Rights. That's an appeal to individual rights and shows an opposition to centralized power. That's all well and good. But the loophole Ron Paul is referring to here, I would actually say there are multiple loopholes. The Interstate Commerce Clause in Article 1, Section 8, the General Welfare Clause, and not for nothing, the ability for people to just ignore the Constitution, pretend it doesn't exist. Once you get to that point, it doesn't matter what it says or doesn't say or how well it's been written. It's a moot point. So first off, interstate commerce, this has been stretched and distorted beyond any recognition. All you need to do is remember the Wickard versus Filburn case, when Filburn, a farmer from Ohio, grew too much wheat according to the Agricultural Adjustment Act of 1938. He grew an amount he was not allowed to grow, and the federal government wasn't happy with him over this. He broke the law, and he argued that the extra wheat he grew was for himself. And the federal government then made the argument, okay, if you grew it for yourself, that means you wouldn't need to go to the market to buy it for yourself. Therefore, you've still affected interstate commerce, and you're found to be at fault. Once you go that far in mental acrobatics, there's no turning back. You've just proven that you're willing to just interpret things until they're so warped, then you can get whatever you want no matter what. Or how about that case for gun-free zones at schools? I forget the name of the case, I apologize. But it was argued that if children can't be educated in gun-free zones, that the stress and anxiety that would cause may cause them to have their education suffer due to all the anxiety that they might experience. And that will mean that they might not be so productive as workers later on in life, and that could affect interstate commerce. So gun-free zones are a thing that the federal government can set up. I don't think I need to explain to you how that is some impressive BS that they pulled off there. That is good stuff, but you see, there you go, there's your loophole. It's mental acrobatics to an astonishing degree. So, one more loophole I mentioned before is, what if the government just doesn't care? The thing that always comes to my mind is alcohol prohibition versus the war on drugs. With alcohol prohibition, even teetotaling puritanical people who thought alcohol was the devil's elixir, even they knew they couldn't do anything on the federal level without a constitutional amendment. So that's what they did. It was a horrible amendment. It led to organized crime. It led to government being empowered with psychopathic tendencies, poisoning people, which resulted in thousands of deaths, imprisoning people for wanting a beer. It was disgusting. But it was done legally from a constitutional standpoint. Now fast forward to the war on drugs. I've actually read the Constitution. I don't see where in the Constitution anything like the war on drugs would be permitted in any sense. But they just did it. They just didn't care. Now, the other thing I mentioned is the General Welfare Clause, which is another one of those things that is behind a huge percentage of federal law, which, again, something like that would render any restriction of government meaningless, because government, to my knowledge, commits no wicked action without first telling us all how it's for your own good, or it's for your general welfare. So general welfare cannot be a permissible reason the Constitution grants the federal government to do anything, because then anything is fair game and the Constitution becomes moot at that point. So again, there's your loophole. Once you get to the point where you can say, well, government has a bunch of restrictions on the federal government, except for when it's for the general welfare, well, like I said, the government does nothing that they don't claim is for the general welfare, so it all means nothing at that point. Now, the other point Ron Paul brings up here, which is a good point, which is, of course, private businesses, and of course he puts the word private in quotes, because honestly, how private can a mega corporation be when it has an army of lobbyists that loiter the halls of Congress every day, and not for nothing? Corporatehood in and of itself is a status granted by government, so I don't consider them private entities anyway. But like clockwork, some leftists responding to this are saying, you see, this is libertarians' fault. They just fall and bow down to corporations, which, is nonsense, since as long as I can remember, libertarians have had a constant and consistent opposition to corporations milking government and influencing legislation. Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, those are both supposedly private companies that I have nothing but contempt for. And if libertarians had their way and our foreign policy wasn't something akin to just being the world's police, they wouldn't be a fraction of the size they are now. Haven't libertarians voiced opposition to GE for massive subsidies they receive? How about Amazon and HQ too? Weren't we saying, hey, government shouldn't be giving out these tax favors, either give it to everyone or no one, but don't pick a major corporation and just give it to them. And the one that goes back the farthest in my lifetime that I can remember is with the former CEO of McDonald's. I think it was like 10 years ago or so. He was advocating for a $15 minimum wage back then. I was dead set against that. And it was the leftist types that were cheering that on. I wasn't, because I knew exactly what he was doing. He wasn't doing this for your benefit. He was advocating for this because he knew a $15 minimum wage would destroy smaller competitors, and McDonald's would make a killing on sucking up that market share. So no, at the very least, not all libertarians are blind to the way this works, and we do oppose it. And it's something that we should continue to oppose. But anyway, that's all for now. Like, subscribe, and share this video with some people. That would be cool, and it is extremely appreciated. And take it easy.